contentness is basically what I'd really like in my life, to be happy really as well with what I have, what I've got, and what I've achieved. To look back and just be content with what I did is probably the ultimate goal, really.
My guest in this episode is a self-proclaimed middle-class Surrey boy who went to grammar school, where he was defined by his ability to swim. He attended university in Manchester before dabbling in recruitment and accounting, and has since built a career in running recruitment teams. Out of work, he spends his time mountain biking, playing board games, and pontificating over his next car or bike purchase whilst enjoying his first and only love, whisky. Simon Jobson, welcome to Unlived Lives.
Thank you so much.
So good to have you. Absolutely brilliant. Teach me about whisky.
Oh, whiskey's about trying lots of whiskies. It's I tell you what, the way that I found more and more of them recently. So one of the key things I actually ended up doing over the lockdown period was that you can actually get these whiskey sets. You can get it from a few different websites where you get sent basically a kit of like 5 little what they call drams of whiskies, and things like that, and you get to then taste them and try them, but not have too much, because obviously if you buy a bottle of whiskey, which can be
investment,
it can be quite expensive, and you don't like it, then you have an expensive thing on your shelf that you have to begrudge drinking, and there's nothing worse than that. So I got into whiskey years ago when I was at university, really, from friends of mine who knew a lot more about it, found the ones I'd liked. And as I've got older, my tastes have become more and more interesting, I suppose, of quite aggressive or peaty whiskey. So you have everyone thinks of whiskey and they think of Jack Daniels, and they mix it with Coke. And hey, I used to do that, and now that makes me cry. And now I want whiskey with no ice, just sort of sitting there by itself, single malts, and it can be quite an expensive hobby to get into. But yeah, by doing all these different tastings, we were doing it every week. So some friends of mine introduced it to me, and then a wider group of people that I'd never met before online. It's actually quite an interesting thing to get into. And then you end up finding the ones you like, what you don't like, and
there's a bit of a community.
Oh, definitely a big community of it as well, online as well. You can get lost in doing these things and going to whiskey tasting nights, but obviously it's expensive. But you then find where you like, and you learn about the regions of especially Scottish whiskies, Irish whiskies, maybe not so much in terms of region, of what they like and where it tastes, distilleries and what you like and what you don't. And yeah, it's a bit of a rabbit hole, and I'm still learning. So
it sounds like a rabbit
from that point of view, but it's an enjoyable thing to do. And also I find it just a bit better than if I want to have one drink after a day of work and have one whiskey. That's quite a lot more enjoyable than a beer or anything as well, which can be sometimes quite nondescript. So it's a bit more of an interesting thing to do, enjoy with friends, and also then makes it easier, I suppose, for me to have gifts bought for me as well. Because what do you want? This bottle. It's easy. just buy me a whiskey from this kind of region, and everything's fine.
Nice. So simple taste. Yeah. That's great. What are you most afraid of?
Oof, that's very interesting. Change gear there very quickly. Exactly. How's your whiskey and your fears? Fears, I suppose everybody, I have a fear of failure. In certain ways, I want to do the best things that I can, and I sort of strive my life around making sure that I don't, I suppose. So, fear of failure of myself, not other people's perceived failure. I probably learned about 10, 12 years ago, not to worry about what other people see as failures and, and wins from that point of view. So my own failure is probably the thing that I had that sort of fear of, or being stagnant, from that way. I like to always be learning, moving forwards, because if I'm not doing that or being challenged, I found myself to get very bored or then feel kind of unsettled. So in like my career or my life, when things almost get sort of like too settled or too normalized, or I'm not moving forwards, or I feel like that kind of frustration, that's what I'm most afraid of, really, as well, that I won't move forward, or I'll just do exactly the same thing for like the next 2 or 3 years. Those are the kind of things that if I lie awake at night and worry about, that's what it would be, I suppose. But it's mainly...
So lack of progression.
Yeah, essentially as well. And yeah, rather than, I suppose, actually failure, to me, like sort of failure would be sort of being stagnant and not moving forwards or not having a plan. Anyone will tell you that when it comes to organising or planning things, I quite like doing that as well. Tend to be quite good at it from, I suppose, part of my job. Or if someone's like, hey, Simon, like my friendship group will be like, we need to go away somewhere.
Right.
Simon, would you like to find us like a big place where we can go and organise it in the timescales? Yes, I'm quite good at doing that, and I like doing
enjoy that. Yeah,
I do, because then I'm, part of my career, my job is like being in control, really, as well. So therefore, when I'm in control of that, it feels good. I'm happy to let other people take the reins if I trust them. That's always a good thing. I don't always doubt that, but also like planning my own things or knowing what I'm going to be doing. So, my girlfriend at the moment is like, I was like, well, what are we going to do? I was like, well, I've already booked us this. We're going to go do this, and this, and then the rest of it will work out as well. But I like at least a core plan. I don't like if someone's like, hey, we're just going to go up to this place and see what happens. I'm like, yeah, I can't do that.
Your defense against your lack of progression, so your biggest fear being your lack of progression, being stagnant, and failure, is making a plan, or how do you defend against it?
So making a plan or asking questions as well, or finding out what I can do to influence it as well. I see a lot of people these days that will moan. They're like, oh, this is rubbish, or this isn't very good, or this isn't going the way that I want. And a lot of times, I'll ask, well, what have you done about it? Oh, nothing. And that frustrates me, really, as well. So I will be like, have a plan or ask a question. I'll be like, right, well, okay, well, I need to go and do this, whether it's been in the past, get a new job, or make a decision on something as well, or go and buy something stupid as well. Like, this will work out fine. No, it's broken.
Various therapies.
Exactly, exactly. So that's the thing. My personal opinion has always been, if you're not like slightly uncomfortable in like what you're doing and and putting yourself in those positions, then you're probably not growing as well. And I like that feeling of sort of like, right, this is uncomfortable, I'm learning, or this is I'm uncomfortable, I'm buying a car that I shouldn't be, or something like that. These things, but 99% of the time, these things work out when you put yourselves in those positions of being uncomfortable, rather than like, if you just sort of accept the status quo, then you end up just being sort of like unhappy. Where you're just like, oh, nothing's changing.
Where might you have learnt that?
It's definitely come through age and making mistakes, completely making mistakes and owning those mistakes and everything as well. Like, when I first came out of university, I thought I wanted to be an accountant because my dad was an accountant. So this seems like a good, stable, steady job to go and do. So do the graduate scheme, go out and do it. Didn't get the grades coming out of university because I got 2-2 and they all want you to have a 2-1. So I went and did recruitment consultancy. Enjoyed it, but I thought then the recession was coming, sort of showing my age there. So therefore went back into accountancy and was just doing it and didn't like it. I think of myself as being someone that when they apply themselves to doing something, everything's doable. But I wasn't passing the exams, and everything as well. I wasn't doing that well. I wasn't enjoying myself doing it. And eventually I lost that job, partly because I didn't want to do it, and partly because I just wasn't passing enough of the exams that this company was paying for as well. And when I lost that job, I felt awful. And then 2 weeks later, I was like, oh, thank goodness. I don't have to do that anymore. And everything as well. And then I ended up going back to being a recruitment consultant as well. And that was uneasy because it felt like I had taken a step back, but then I built my career out of it as well. And again, then I had that job. The first job in recruitment didn't really work that well. And then, essentially then got another job in it and then started to find my feet. But because I was always pushing it, but when I wasn't happy, I quit it. But I was an accountant for far too long. I was an accountant for like 15, 16 months. I should have quit after 3.
Why didn't you?
Because, it was one of those things where I'd made a change and I thought it was something I had to stick to. It was one of those things I was like, I have to give this a go. I can't just give up straight away. Like, this should be easy. Other people are doing this. This seems a safe bet when it's a recession. So it was the obvious choice, in theory, the safe choice of what to do. But I just didn't enjoy it.
Right.
And then when I found out, that like leaving that job and losing that job, which at the time felt awful, because it's like, you're not very good at this, you can't do that. Talk about fear of failure. That felt awful. Someone telling me that you weren't good enough to do it. And I hadn't really failed up until then, had an okay time at school, done other things in terms of like sports and things like that, and always been able to put in effort and do quite well and be in the upper echelons. Then suddenly I was doing this that a lot of other people were doing and I was failing at, and I suddenly realized like, okay, this isn't for me. I shouldn't like keep pushing it. And I think, a lot of people, I get people jobs all the time, they sort of sit there and they begrudgingly do things all the time. And that was the first time. It wasn't really my decision, but I tried to then own it as my decision, be like, well, let's say that you weren't happy doing it. Move on, go and do the thing that you were enjoying before, which was the recruitment consultancy. That was good fun. You were enjoying, you were good at it. And then did that, pursued it, carried on doing it, and then built something from it. And then also I learned a lot more that when things weren't working, to leave as well, or like make changes and everything as well.
And that's where you learned that lesson.
That and relationships as well. I had probably had a relationship around that same sort of time as well, where it was obvious that the relationship wasn't working.
Right.
And you kept pushing it and forcing it. It was like, well, we'll move in together, or we'll do this. And like, everything about it was wrong. There was, arguments, there was unhappiness. Everything about it was wrong. People from the outside were being like, this relationship doesn't work. You're not happy in this relationship. You are not the person that you were before. And we don't get to see you as well. And then taking ownership and making a decision on that, again, gave me much more ownership. Being like, ending something just because you should do it because it will actually make you happier. It wasn't anything like actually like fundamentally wrong in terms of like, this is an awful relationship or abusiveness or anything like bad like that. It was just an unhappiness of two people that shouldn't be together. And then by taking ownership of that, I was probably around 24, 25 at the time, so going back 10 years, I suddenly realised in the space of like 2-3 years, taking ownership, ending things, and then going and searching for things that were better will make you a lot happier and everything as well, because then you had ownership of the decisions, rather than having the decisions made for you, where therefore you don't know if they're right or not.
So where did your sort of confidence and awareness of that, how did that happen?
Over time and making mistakes, like making the mistakes of doing that too long or doing that job too long. I didn't, I watched other people as well be sort of very confident in decisions that they made. And I'd be like, well, how did you do that? How did you have the balls to do that and everything as well? This seems crazy. And then you see them 6 months later and they'd be doing really well because they were taking a slight risk, or they were making conscious changes like, well, I don't like this, so I'm going to change it rather than wait for something or someone else to change it for me, which is quite commonplace, or how I used to feel. It's like, well, no one else is changing. I just sort of keep doing what I'm doing. And that's where it came about from. But it was only after you sort of like made the changes and then realised like 6 or 12 months later, like, I am much happier now as well. And looking back on it, then you start to make more changes, or you start to ask more questions and push the envelope of what's going on and feel more confident about it. It's definitely an experience thing rather than actually being like, I've read this or I've studied this or done that. It was just one of those things. People used to tell me about it, but I'd be like, I don't know if I can do that. But then when I'd done it myself, I tend to feel much more confident in.
You realise you could, and
exactly that. I think I always have a bit more faith when I've done something myself and I've seen it work, rather than having someone tell me that as well, because I tend to be a little bit sceptical, really as well, or because I suppose I've always been. Like from when I was a kid or anything like that, or when you're at university, you're always pretty much told to challenge everything, really, as well. It's like, well, challenge it. Why do you know it's the right thing? Shouldn't you ask questions? And you're like, and that's always been in my mind about like, well, where does that information come from? Should I challenge it? Should I not? Or should I go read more about it?
Yeah. So where do you learn? How do you learn?
How do I learn? Definitely from like actual experiences happening. I like reading, and everything as well, or listening to various things and trying to absorb information. So whether that be from things like magazines or webinars or things like that I've done as part of my job, or I like learning about cars and bikes. So I would just go and read all the articles possible, really as well, to make sure that I can go and I don't make decisions on a whim,
right?
Really as well, like. My parents, my mum was a nurse and my dad was an accountant. Two very safe jobs, very secure people in terms of what they do, didn't take any risks, all in a good way and everything as well. And that sort of put that element like, well, I'll go and do this. So, it's like buying a new car. I won't go and do it on a whim. I'll do like 9 months of research, loads of reading. I'll go and read a bunch of forums about what I'm doing. And
pontificating.
Yes, exactly like that as well. But if I'm going to do anything that's going to be big, I'll read out about it and then go and make those decisions on informed. I have to have all the information before I make decisions and everything as well. And that doesn't mean kicking the can down the road. Just that means that when I do make that decision, I'm 100% sure about it, really as well. And I feel good about it and then I can have ownership. And I'd rather do that and see it through. I mean, there's been other decisions that, I've ended up not doing because at one point, about a few years ago, I thought about, moving to America. I was like, I'll move to America and do my job over there. And when I did all the research and started having the chats, I was like, this isn't for me. It's a great idea. It's like, run away, escape, go and be in another country and do this job. It'd be really cool. Then when I looked into it, I was like, no, I'm going to work even more hours. I'm not going to see that country and everything as well. And it's not guaranteed that there'll be any succession. Whereas staying here and doing this will guarantee the succession if I then change and do something different here. And that was, I did all the decision-making thing. It would have been very easy if I was just being like, just want to get out of this place and go do something else somewhere else because I feel like I should do before I'm like 35. And then, but I didn't, and I feel really good about that. I don't feel like I missed out. I don't feel like, oh my goodness, I haven't worked abroad. I was just like, I looked at it, it wasn't for me and what I wanted to do. And now where I've gone has actually been more successful than doing that.
So why do you have the ambitions you have?
I've always been competitive. I think, from a young age, I always liked sports, things like that. I talked about my being defined by swimming. So I was always a swimmer and I was a good swimmer. So therefore, when I swam as a child and then played water polo, moved to the upper echelons of what that meant and how that did, and I like succeeding and doing that, and you're always moving forward. And you find that as well a lot as like a child and teenager. If you're good at something, a lot of times within schools, my parents didn't push me that much. They were like, hey, if you want to do it, that's fine. But they weren't like the kind of parents to be like, right, you've got to go and do this and be excellent. And we want you to be like, how many times do you see, I suppose, your football dad on the side being like, go on, do that. You're going to be a great footballer. And the kid's like, I like rugby. Can I not do that? No, you're going to play football. And you see a lot of that. My parents weren't like that. They're like, if you like it, well, do it. You can go to all the swim classes you want and do all of that. And that was that and went through all that. So I think that competitiveness meant that I always liked moving forwards. So then at university, it was the same, carried on playing water polo there. That pushed me up another level because you're playing with like ex-international players. You're like, wow, I'm not as good as what I thought I was. Train harder, work harder, do that and see if you can try and keep up with them. But, academia was always something that, my parents liked really as well. They wanted us to do well because they were just like, it will give you a good grounding for where you want to be in the future. If you're academic and you can do this, then you'll have whatever options you want. So the only thing they ever asked for was that be good at your classes, do all your school classes, don't do that and everything as well, because it's going to like stead you well going forwards. Both me, my brother and my sister have all been like academically very good. Not excellent, not like the top of any school, but always good in those, again, like sort of like top 15, 20%. And it means that you get used to that as well, like doing well, getting the right grades, and that competitiveness of being like, well, I want A's, I want B's, I want A stars and things like that, then translates. And then you find out that then it's quite enjoyable then when you're going to work and things like that, and you find that you are better than other people. That's really an enjoyable feeling as well. You're like, well, if I work harder, then I'll progress quicker and I'll be getting these rewards better, or this will be recognised a bit better. It's quite enjoyable. It's quite enjoyable. But then when you're standing still and you're not doing anything apart from yourself, it sort of just gets a bit dull and boring.
Do you wish your parents pushed you more as a kid?
No, not really, because then I think that they would have pushed me, to do something that I probably didn't want to do.
Right.
As well. Like, I mean, I'd be perfectly honest with you, I had an excellent childhood. I literally probably one of the few people in the world that probably has no complaints about their sort of like family life and sort of like parents growing up. They were good to me. They worked hard, got amazing memories. We had all, we weren't spoilt, but then there wasn't that things that we couldn't have. We had a good education and everything as well, and got to enjoy it. I probably got along with my parents more as I got older, interestingly enough, as they found me more interesting and I found them more interesting as well with things to talk about. But yeah, it's always been good. Probably very close in our sort of like immediate family rather than sort of like big wide family as well. But brother and sister still in contact. So they pushed me the right amount. They just gave me support, really, as well, rather than pushing me. And that, I think, leads me to sort of like probably do it more myself rather than do it for someone else.
I'll let you have a drink.
I talk far too much.
Oh, it's great. That's what this is all about. In what ways are you prone to addiction?
I suppose, yeah. I don't know. Well, obviously, I drink and I smoke, really, as well. So you could argue that, those are addictions in themselves, I suppose. But I wouldn't say, that I do it to a point. I've always been able to be in control of those. I want me to stop at either of those. And I usually do it for more enjoyment's sake rather than doing that. Definitely addicted to achieving at work, though, as well. That's addictive. When it starts going well, my job is obviously very much month to month. You're only as good as your last month. You and your team are only as good as your last month or your last quarter.
Right.
And that's addictive. When it starts going well, you want to do better the next one. So then you're like, we just come to the end of a quarter at work. And it's like, well, how do we just had a record one. How do we do better? How do we get that done? And then that sends me into sort of overdrive, I suppose, of being like, right, well, I've got to plan this. I've got to do this. Who have I got to do? What should I hire? Where can we go and get that? How can we replicate what that happened again? How can I dissect what that was? And I can go down rabbit holes very quickly of like trying to find the information to make sure it's there. Because then if we don't have as good a sort of like month or quarter, then I feel like I feel a bit of loss, and then I'll probably then end up, instead of like going into it, I'll be like, well, we just need to work harder. How much harder can I work? How much harder can I do this? What can I do there? And that is addictive to me. The work that, the money that we make, the career path that it puts me on and everything as well is definitely addictive.
What's at the end of that road, though?
Oh, who knows? And that's kind of what's exciting. Is at the end of that road me being like an owner of the business and everything as well and having full ownership of what goes on there? Is it growing it to a more international business where I get more exposure to different regions and what we do? The career development of others, that's so addictive. When you take someone that doesn't know what they're doing and then 2-3 years later, they're very good at it and they're excelling in that way. And you can be like, I helped create that. That's addictive. And I like doing that. And I've done that for nearly 10, 11 years now. And it's addictive to see that. It's addictive then, when I'm seeing a guy next week that I used to work with and then helped build his career, and he's doing really well now. And it was off the back of like what me and him did together and what we built, and the ideas that I took from him and the ideas that he took from me. And he still calls me every now and again, probably every sort of like 3-4 months, and we'll be like, hey, I'm about to do this. What should I do next? I was like, come on, mate, it's got to be your career now. And he goes, but he's just like, but sometimes he goes, I need the Jobson bluntness and everything as well. Just to tell me to shut up and get on with it and go and make that decision. He said, you were always very good at helping me make that decision or pushing over the edge. I'm like, I'm good at doing that outside of it as well. I can be quite perceptive, but it doesn't mean that I'm always good at doing it myself. It's always something I want to do, but it's not something that I can obviously force others to do. And that's probably my biggest addiction.
So in what ways might you be a difficult person to work with or for?
I'm a know-it-all, essentially, as well. So I like to think that because I do sort of like so much reading and work and I always want to know what's going on, I think of myself as a know-it-all, which can be a pain in the arse, as you can imagine, because I'm like, no, I know better. I've done this for 11 years, or I've researched that, or this happened to me 5 years ago. And, can be quite single-minded in those ways, because I've seen what works and do that, and be like that. People that I work with say, you can be a bit of a know-it-all arsehole, which is fine, but I quite like doing that but the problem is that, in the same way saying that, 80% of the time I think I'm right, especially when it comes to work and things like that. And things that I don't know about, I won't comment on, really, as well, because I probably got myself into a position earlier on in life where you think, I kind of know a bit about everything, and you try and blag your way through it and then get found out pretty quickly. You look pretty silly. So saying I don't know about that, or tell me more, or where have you researched it, that's what I probably become better at. But being difficult to work with, I can be a quite I tend to take the emotions out of work quite a lot. So the work that I do and everything as well can be very emotional. There's lots of stress. There's lots of people very changing jobs, and I can be quite, it's my job really as well. I don't tend to see the emotion in it, but you tend to take it out of it a lot more when you've done it a lot more. So people are just like, I said, well, don't you care? I said, no, I do care, but I'm being pragmatic and logical because that's what's going to help us fix this problem. So I can do that quite a lot, where I sort of take the emotions out of when like big decisions have to be made. And then some people will be like, well, don't you care? So you get accused quite a lot of not caring.
Do you think there might be anything lost because of that for you? Talking about progression, if you go outwardly as a know-it-all, self-proclaimed as a know-it-all, what do you think you might lose in that?
You probably get, if someone does that, then people aren't going to probably ask you for advice as much because they think you're going to sort of like force your opinion on them rather as well, which is obviously, that can be seen as a bit of a frustration. So people aren't going to ask you for information, or they're going to think, oh, he's just going to give me his idea rather than listen to mine, where I do think I have two ears and one mouth, and I do try and listen and retain what people say. But yeah, that will be, I don't think I've lost out. I probably lost out in progression earlier on in my career when I wasn't listening, or, just try and do it belligerently and stubbornly my own way, before you realise that actually taking ideas of people around you is better. And just because they don't know what they're doing, they might actually have a better way of doing it. Probably only learned that about 3-4 years ago.
Right.
Where I was just like, that person isn't very good. And then watched them do their job really well. I was like, in theory, everything about what they're doing is wrong from what I've been taught and what I've thought. So why is he doing it so well? And that really, I was like, okay, well, now I have to let sort of like the people be them. There's no point in creating a bunch of mini Simons because that's boring. And, and no one wants that really as well. I don't need another bunch of mini me's. But yeah, I think that's probably the main thing that sort of like maybe sort of held me back, is that sort of know-it-all. I've tried to change it quite a lot. I try to listen, and I try to ask more questions, I suppose, now, being like, well, what should I do? And a lot of what I've learned probably over the last few years, and when people ask me that, like whether in life or in work, is I go, well, what do you think you should do? If you've got two options and you're at a crossroads, which are the two options that you're going to go down? Because it always frustrates me and goes, I don't know what to do. Have you got any ideas? No. Okay, well, that's annoying. I can't create, the solution and fix the problem at the same time, because basically there's my problem and you're not doing anything. That annoys me. And I'm like, well, come on, two options. Just pick it out of a hat. Even if it's completely wrong, go for it. And that's become a lot better at doing, because then I don't seem so much of a know-it-all. Because obviously it's very easy when someone goes, I've got this problem. What you need to do is this. Do you want to hear my solution? No. And that's probably helped me a bit more. But then I still end up putting probably my know-it-all spin on it as well. I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea if we just tweak it this way. So they still have ownership to a point, but yes, try and do a bit more those ways.
What do you imagine people say when they gossip about you?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Again, probably the know-it-all thing, talks too much as well. Can't get a word in edgeways. Does he have a drinking problem? No, it's fine. I do drink a lot. I know that, but it's usually very much socially drinking. Would be what I suspect. The main reason I know that is because that's what my family gossip about me as well. They're like, you out at the pub, Simon? Yes. Oh, okay, fine. What are you doing this evening? Oh, I'm having 3 beers in the garden. Oh, who with? By myself, because it's fun and it's sunny. And they're like, okay. So, they sort of perceive it that way. I think there's quite a lot. I don't mind drinking alone, just having a couple of nice drinks by myself and doing that. A lot of people I sort of speak to and find out really don't like that. They're like, why do you drink alone? Because I've got nice whiskey and nice beer. It's really, really tasty. And then if I can literally drink it and not have to talk about it, it's really, really fun, because then you don't interrupt my beer with your conversation. But I think those would be the main things as well. Prone to a bit of exaggeration sometimes as well. I think that, Simon can be a bit more of a one-upmanship person when it comes to like stories and ideas. But then I'm competitive. So that's probably where that comes from.
Very self-aware.
Probably yes and no. I think if you want to progress, you have to be able to be sort of quite self-critical. I think if you think that you know everything, then obviously I can come across as a know-it-all, then you'll never learn. Like, half the fun of like life and what goes on is that you get to learn new things, introduce it, like, as we said before, like we were at the beginning here with all the whiskies. I thought I knew a bit about whiskey. Then after drinking like 60, 70 different whiskies over sort of like 12 months, Now I actually know about whiskey. Now I've got a better understanding, and there's so much more that I can learn. I'm nowhere near an expert, but I would like to be in the next 20 years, because that's probably how long it's going to take.
Growing up, who was the favourite in your family?
Sister, 100%. And I think this is something that we kind of rib our family quite a lot, really, as well. It's quite well done for me. I've quite open conversations about it in my family. I was an accident. They were planning on having children, but not as early as what they were initially planning on doing. So I was a little bit unexpected. My sister was planned, the wanted child, and my brother was 8 years later, so definitely an accident as well. And this is all absolutely fine to say, because there's a picture on social media of my brother holding a birthday card saying he was an accident, so it's absolutely fine. So it's well documented. But yeah, but whether that's true or not is actually a thing. It was just sort of like a perceived sort of like favoritism as well. Like, I was the oldest, my sister was 2 years younger, but not in a bad way where it was ever detrimental. So, yeah, you're probably going to ask me why, and I'm going to have to try and work out really as well. But it just was sort of like various things, like when there be arguments, it's that it comes about with sort of like boys and girls and how they sort of have to grow up and what boys and girls can't do, which is very relevant in this day and age where, boys have to be sort of like big and strong, but not too big and strong. So obviously my sister and me used to fight because, kids, when you're like 8 and 6, you're going to knock shades out of each other really as well, because it's fun and that's what you do, and you get wound up when you're in a house and you're just crawling all over each other. So therefore, obviously, as the big brother was like, Simon, don't do that. And I'm like, she literally threw something at me. Like, what are you doing? Like, she started the fight. It's not my fault that I've got a handful of her hair in my hand now. That's irrelevant as well. So that's, I suppose, where you think about the favoritism comes from. But then my sister lived at home for quite a few more years before she actually moved out. So she was always around there, was privy to probably a lot more information around some of my family and parents. Where I moved out pretty much straight away after coming back from university, I was like, yeah, no, I quite liked having my own space. Need to do this again as well. And I can't be as tidy as what you need me to be.
And how do you feel about that now? How do you feel about her having been the favourite, or still the favourite now?
Doesn't really bother me, being perfectly honest with you. I would say that, probably after I sort of came back from university, my relationship with my parents changed a lot more. The independence decisions that I was making, the growing up decisions about buying houses, and like, I've actually got to buy my own car and do this kind of stuff, became a lot more adult. And I felt like I was doing probably a lot more adult things by sort of moving out, going around, changing jobs 3 times than my sister. So it doesn't really make any difference really now. And there's, looking back on it, that was a perceived favoritism being as well, where probably being, the older brother, I should have been, probably a bit more of an adult, a bit more grown up in what was going on, even though my sister was like trying to wind me up.
Could you isolate a driving force, a sort of final goal away from work?
That's a good question. I've been sort of criticised. My work defines me quite a lot because that's the sort of singularity of the goals. But contentness is basically what I'd really like in my life, to be happy really as well with what I have, what I've got, and what I've achieved. And everything as well. I want to be able to look back in 15, 20 years and be like, I achieved that and it was mine, or I owned that car that I always wanted to really as well, because I could. I did that, and that was an enjoyable thing to go and try and do. Or I travelled to that place because I had the time to go and do that as well, when I could do it in the way that I wanted to. And to look back and not have, I don't have any regrets now, which is, probably if you asked me those 10 years, I would have thought they would be 10 years ago. I thought there'd be regrets, and now I sort of look back and they are just, learning points of what it is. But to look back and just be content with what I did is probably the ultimate goal, really, rather than be like, it's not like I want a house here doing this with this much land or something. I don't care about those type of things. Just to be happy and look back and realise that, you had a good life and good people in it. That's the ultimate, really.
So what would be a good death for you?
That is interesting. That is something I've never thought about. quick, potentially would be the obvious one, rather than probably some sort of long or drawn out sort of like illness that sort of like goes on and on. Yeah, a quick death, ideally, but after a full life. I've always sort of said, wouldn't mind. I've not even said that. I've always thought I wouldn't mind if it was like quick, or doing something that I enjoyed, or doing something I was pushing. Like I was throwing myself down a mountain on a mountain bike when I'm 60. You're probably going to kill yourself doing that. So, but wouldn't do. But yeah, just quick, really, and contented, and that obviously then also would be the least painful to the people around you, really, as well. It's an odd thought.
What do you want to do when you retire?
Being honest, when I retire, I'd like to stop and build my own car. That's something I've always looked back and do. There's the kit car type of things. If I could have a garage where I could just go and build my own car and then completely learn about cars are something I really like, but I don't know how to maintain them in the ways I do. I don't know what really makes them work. So to go and build my own of something that I've looked at for years and always really enjoyed owning and enjoyed reading about or watching racing, that would be cool, really, as well. And then to be able to do that, have something that I completely built myself, that would give me my own self-fulfillment, where I'm just like, I built that all myself, and it's a completely like complex piece of engineering. That would be, I think, quite amusing.
Is there any reason you haven't pursued that as a career?
Time, and the thing is, that's for me is a hobby, really, as well, and that almost gives me this, like we sort of talked about before, like working on my bikes and doing that, or like cleaning my car or maintaining the car to the limited amounts that I can do it as well. Those are enjoyable hobbies for me that allow me to, sort of like have a balance between work and doing those type of things. I like going on YouTube and being like, I don't know how to fix this. How can I work it out? I despise giving it to a guy to go and fix or maintain. I want to learn how to do it myself, because then I feel like in the long run that I'm going to get more out of it. But being perfectly honest, I looked at selling cars before I went into recruitment, and it just wasn't stable enough, really, as well. And I couldn't see where it went as well. I was just like, well, you just keep selling cars. Where does it go? You could hit some upper echelons, but it didn't seem something that was going to give me the enjoyment or the career path where I keep fulfilling myself all the time.
How is recruitment different?
You've got so many different more avenues that you can go down to in what you're selling, I suppose, in terms of people, and then management, and then ownership of business, and on how that business works and what it does. And, if you're going to take a company and then go and sell it, where essentially like car buying is, from what I see and from what I was then researching at the time, you're always looking for the stock. You get the stock and then you go and sell it to your products and everything as well. However much money you earn, yes, you could go and have your own business and run it yourself there, but you can do that in recruitment as well. But it's a bit too one-dimensional, and if you ever got bored of doing it, for example, then what could you go and do? Whereas recruitment gives me options. I can go and sell other things, or I can go and do other types of sales roles in different industries as well, from the skills that I've learned away from just selling people, essentially, and the business acumen that I've got from it in terms of how you run it, what you're doing, what the profitability is, and how you sort of structure that, hiring people, what they do, their career goals beyond just hitting sales numbers is a bit more enjoyable.
And sort of lockdown aside, of the people you spend time with, who brings out your best qualities?
It'll be my it's at the moment, from the best qualities, my girlfriend at the moment brings out good qualities, really challenges me in the way that I sort of think and what I do, and and the conversations that I have, around that, and sort of giving a bit more awareness of sort of things, and probably my own feelings, and sort of how everything else in the world is, just by being, probably a more experienced person and dealing with people and dealing with situations as well, which has been enjoyable. And then the rest of it is my friends. So I've still got the same friendship group that I went to school with. So from the age of 11, I'm still hanging out with the same 6 or 7 people when I'm 35, and they bring out a side of me and an enjoyment and a sort of a relaxed part where we just get along so well. We play they play the board games that we play together and everything, and just hang out. And they're the key people, I would say, that are probably in my life that bring out sort of the best parts of me.
Board games?
Board games, yes. So we play it started off, must be about 7 or 8 years ago. that I got into a game called Settlers of Catan. And it turns out that my friend, sort of like Marcus, Liam, Paul, Mike, and Brad were playing a Game of Thrones board game. It was incredibly complex, and what these call these worker placement games of how you sort of move people around, draw various resources to create sort of like a winning mentality, whether that's gaining areas on a board. And it's sort of snowballed where, being perfectly honest with you, Marcus and Brad have had the ideas and the ownership, and they have the knowledge base and everything as well. And then me and other friends just sort of turn up and enjoy them as well. Probably doing that a disservice. But we found it something to be a better way of just hanging out in an evening as well. It's like, well, I can go around to your house, play board games, drink nice alcohol and hang out with my mates and hear each other and still have that, rather than going to a pub and sitting around a table and you can't hear each other. Probably my age showing as I got to my late 20s and being like, I don't want to go sit in a loud bar anymore when we've got nice alcohol at home. But it's also a nice way of doing it, because it can be quite challenging. These games, like, to learn them sometimes we have to sit down and go through 40 minutes of rules, which sounds boring, but it isn't, because it's you learn it. It's a challenge. You're working out something new to do. And then if you're all learning at the same speed, then it's, we're all competitive people. We all want to win and everything as well. So, some people are definitely better than others, but there's nobody in it that's just awful and doesn't get it. So, yeah, it's a more enjoyable way to spend time with your mates. But then it's sort of, we've obviously then, as it's probably where it comes from, we're always looking for that next challenge of like, what are the most complex ones? How can we do that? And we're now playing a game sometimes when we have the time that takes a whole day to play, where we'll have to sit down at 9 a.m. and play, but it will be at least 10, 11 hours long.
Amazing.
It's interesting. The first time we did it, it was mentally challenging. But then the biggest thing at the end of doing it, even though I have never won this game, and a few people have, because it takes so long, you're like, well, I want to try again. I want to do that again. I can see what I did wrong. Let's do it again. Let's play again. Not obviously straight away, but like in a month or so's time, when people have got the time and the weekends to do that.
So it's addictive.
Yeah, it's addictive because obviously with these things, when you play it, like, it's like a lot of situations when you do it, and if you can evaluate how you went wrong or why you didn't win, you're like, okay, well, I want to play it again because now I want to change how I did it, make that decision slightly better. And you can tweak it and you can get better at it and everything as well. But the thing is, you're, with a number of other people that are very intelligent and they're working it out just as quick, if not quicker than you normally, that you have to try and stay a step ahead of them. That's where the competitiveness comes in. So there's these board game cafes that sort of turn up. But I would say that someone like my friend Marcus and Brad probably have upwards of sort of like 50, 60 games that we can now rotate and play around them that we've accumulated over the years. And then I'll get like a text on a WhatsApp being like, we've got this new game. And I'm like, this is cool. Like, I've got no idea even what it is. Let's just play it.
Let's do it. Are you at where you wanted to be at this stage in your life?
I perceive my life to be different. At 35, I probably perceived myself to be like, when I was in my 20s, I thought I'd be married and have kids. But I'm not disappointed that I don't, really, as well, because if I was married and had kids right now, I would have forced a previous relationship or something into that, which clearly wasn't working as well. So therefore I would be unhappy married and have kids. So in theory, I thought, that where I am and what I'm doing in terms of my life and sort of the relationships that I have, probably slightly different to what I perceived, but I'm better in work than where I thought I would be, really, as well. So I'm ahead of the curve where I think I am there in terms of where my goals and achievements that I set out probably a few years ago are, in terms of where I'm probably going to be getting to. So it's all about ups and downs, really, as well. So some of it's gone better, some of it hasn't, but it's all gone in a reasonably right. It's all gone in the right direction where I don't have any regrets about it.
When you were a child, what did you want to do?
Oh, I just want to be a racing car driver, really, as well. Spent half my time in go-karts as a kid, really, as well. I didn't own my own one. That was something that I was like, I remember specifically asking him, I said, Dad, can I have a go-kart? He's like, no, it's really expensive. And what are you going to do? It's just going to be an endless stream of money. Go and play on the hire carts all the time, which we did. And that was enjoyable, really, as well. So I'm always glad that happened, because otherwise it would have just taken up all of our time and bankrupted my dad, probably, looking back at it. But I just like driving fast round in circles, and that's the thing where obviously you're just endlessly trying to get slightly better every lap. Can I go faster? Can I go faster? Can I go a tenth faster here? Or can I do an overtake here? And that's just enjoyable. But yeah, would love to have been a racing car driver, but it's in the same way that some children want to be astronauts. It's not really always going to happen for everybody. Going
faster and faster, just like you say, you are constantly pushing yourself at work.
Yeah, it's just a lot of that, as you can see, a lot of the things that I enjoy are the things that are moving forward, or doing this, or hitting that next stage, or just getting slightly better. It's enjoyable to try and improve all the time as well. So yeah, it's hard to sort of put, and you want to be improving and moving forwards. So, and that's the thing, where driving around in circles, trying to be quicker than someone else. Yeah, it's again that competitiveness.
To what end?
I'm usually an accident as well if we're going to do it on the karting side. But the thing is that I suppose in terms of me, so I suppose pushing myself and trying to get better and better. As long as I feel like I'm moving forwards or moving upwards, it'll always be good. There'll be times that obviously it will stagnate or do that, and I'll have to find something else, or I'll find a new challenge to go and do that, or grow myself in a different way, whether that's going to be qualifications or different things in the future. But I'm not overly worried about it. I don't tend to sort of sit at home and go, oh, what am I going to do in 10 years? It doesn't really bother me too much. I'm kind of excited and interested to see sort of like where I end up.
Well, hopefully contentment.
Yes, well, that'd be the ideology, wouldn't it? So, but I think as long as I just keep sort of achieving and the right things sort of keep happening, then I'll be content really as well. Because then if I hit those achievements, or have the things that I want to go and do, and be able to support any hobbies that I go and do as well, then that's going to be really good fun.
You have a dog licking your hands.
I do, there. Yes, very nice.
Simon Jobson, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been really fantastic to have you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Amazing. If you enjoyed this exploration into Simon's unlived life, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the YouTube channel for a new episode every Wednesday. Did you gain something from this episode? Let me know in the comments section. I hope you enjoyed watching.